kids that can't sit still go with Grandma into the recreation hall. Poor Grandma. She can manage it. She's been doing it for years.
Fortunate Grandma.
Come on, Nate.
Ada, come on in here.
Be a father, and some of you don't have the coffee. And I want to tell you something I've learned over the years about family relationships. I remember years ago we had a family reunion up to a Weaver. And we held a testimony, and quite a few of you got up and said something very beautiful. And I remember what Doug Nairn said. This was before he and Lillian were married. Something that he said he had to tell in his own family. And yet, even so, there's the thing which some of us refer to as the stallion syndrome. That's expurgated from what sheepherders call it. But, some of you have probably never observed a herd of wild horses. But there's always just one, unless it's a large herd, only one stallion in a herd. And he tolerates the young stallions until they come of age, and then he whips them out of the band. Can't stand to have around. And there's a little bit of that in human beings. And some fathers are able to control this and others are not. We saw a beautiful show the other night called Christmas Eve, which depicted a father that was not able to control his feelings and said and did things to his children that caused such deep resentment that they ran away from home. Years later, when the children were grown up, were in their early 20s, the grandmother, whom these children loved dearly, hired an investigator who went out and hunted and found all three of these children. And none of them wanted to come back. Well, she knew that they would come back, and she invited the investigator to come to her home that night for the dinner that she was giving for those children. And they sat around and waited, and finally at midnight, all three of them showed up, and the one son who had gone to Canada to avoid going to the Vietnam War showed up with his wife and a boy. And it was a thrilling thing. And then the father showed up. He had been taking his mother to court to take away the fortune that she had because he claimed she was incompetent. He came and handed her the papers and said, I will no longer press these charges. And then the children came forward and they all threw their arms around their father, and it was love. And I've done a lot of thinking about it. I know I've said things that have caused resentment because I don't have as good a control of my tongue as James tells us we should have. And my son Joe had written me a letter about things, and I had planned to read it that same day, but I didn't. And a couple of days had gone by, and I woke up in the night and thought to myself, what's he going to think if I don't read that right away? So I got up in the night and read it, and it was beautiful. And then went back to bed and went to sleep. So about 3 o'clock I got up and went downstairs and wrote this on the computer. I hope I didn't keep anybody awake. And I wanted to read it to you, if I can control control myself as I read it. I've entitled this The Hidden Man, but I don't know that that's really the title I want. It's close, though. Our perception of each other is often clouded with surface frictions that hide or fail to reveal the deep and important feelings we have for each other. I once heard President Gunther of the Provo Temple Presidency say something to this effect. He said that the children we have in this life are really not ours. They belong to our Father in heaven and are only placed in our mortal custody as an earthly stewardship. If we could see them in their pre-existent state as the offspring of God, we would feel to bow down and worship them. Our Catherine has had this experience in having been privileged to see and feel the spirit of our departed son Matthew. She was so overcome with the beauty of his spiritual being that she sat trembling and weeping in the Idaho Falls Temple on the occasion of Glenn's wedding. Having come to an understanding of this principle, I have looked upon my mature offspring as my co-equal brothers and sisters. I have even felt a willingness at times to accept their counsel and suggestions as coming from respected friends rather than feeling resentment for having been put in my place by someone who should be taking counsel from me. However, I confess that I did not always maintain this perspective. At times I have harbored feelings of resentment at being instructed or criticized by someone less experienced than myself. Last night I lay upon my pillow into the wee hours, pondering on the subject of the feelings of resentment that we feel for each other as family members. What is the cause of this resentment, and why do we have it for one person and not another? I do not believe that it is because one person is better or more important than another. I think it may be that sometimes our natures clash in an abrasive way because of personality differences. But we need to learn to deal with this from an eternal perspective rather than the blindness of mortality. These surface feelings often hide the deep bonds of brotherhood and sisterhood that become pushed aside by the frustrations of injured pride or feelings of resentment. This brings to mind the words of Bobby Burns, "What God would give us the gift to see ourselves as others see us." Or paraphrasing, we need to project our feelings towards each other on an eternal plane so that we always see or feel who we really are and what our relation to each other really is. The feelings of resentment that we allow to creep into our hearts come from our enemy who seeks always to make us miserable as he is miserable. Our feelings of love for each other come from him who seeks always to bring us joy and happiness. An example of what I'm getting at is that of the relationship that has developed over the years with our oldest daughter, Catherine. In those precious days we had at Green Jacket with our first baby, that tiny child that had the full attention of her parents. She was literally bathed in our love. As the years went by, however, there were many new arrivals on the scene, and gradually Catherine was unintentionally pushed aside to the fringes of that parental light of love. She was bombarded by the usual scoldings that the oldest gets because she should have done better because she was the oldest. During one of those times when she was being scolded by her father, she said something that was burned into my conscience like a flashing neon sign. "Daddy, you're not listening to what I'm saying." Since then, I have tried to develop or cultivate a better father-daughter relationship, and have felt that I was doing a fair job. But only recently did I finally break through into the full light of the love that should exist between family members. The occasion was such that I chanced to spend half a day just visiting with Catherine alone. And before leaving, I took her to lunch and spent an unhurried moment with that little girl I once knew back at Green Jacket. As we parted that day, she said, "Daddy, I've come back to Green Jacket." But this Christmas Day, I opened a present from Catherine, which was the book, How Green Was My Valley. I just sat with tears coming down my face. Life is good. We all need to make that trip back to our Green Jacket. We all need to recognize the insignificance of the surface irritations we have with each other. We need to look clearly at feelings of hurt pride or resentment and smother them with those deep-seated feelings of love that bond us together as brothers and sisters in our Heavenly Father's family. A point in case is that of the relationship I have with the last leaves. I don't know whether you've all seen the little vignette the church put out about a little girl that was dying. And what was the name of the artist? Art Carney. He was the artist that painted the last leaves so the little girl didn't see it disappear. Good through the night. Where was I? My point in case is that of the relationship I have with the last leaves on our family vine, that is Lucy and Johnny. I confess that we have done a pretty good job of spoiling both of them, but through it all, there has developed a bond of understanding and love that overcomes the petty irritations that crop up. Although we get upset with each other quite frequently due to our Gaelic tendencies, we see through the clouds to each other's spirits and just brush off any deep-seated resentments. I meant to cross out any deep-seated, any resentments. I want all of you to know, in-laws included, that I love each one of you with deep feelings of respect and admiration. I know that my tongue hangs on a pretty loose hinge, but my heart is continually struggling to keep it in check, even if my mouth seems to be an awfully slippery place at times. On those wonderful occasions when we are able to get together as a family, I sense just a taste of what our eternal existence is all about, and how important it is that we make good effort to stay faithfully on that path that will lead us there. May God help us as a family to always cultivate those deep feelings of an eternal nature and to brush aside the silly frictions that lead downward to resentment and sorrow. I am thoroughly convinced that what is meant by the word charity or the pure love of Christ is this: to learn to see through the mortal crust or shell that hides the eternal spirit of each person we encounter in this life. I feel that this is how God is able to love all of us. He sees our intrinsic nature. A corollary to these thoughts is that we also need to gain an insight to our own intrinsic nature. As the poet said, we come from afar trailing clouds of glory. If we know ourselves clearly, we are better able to lead a good life. You know, I grew up with the idea that Abraham was told to sacrifice his son Isaac because God needed to test Abraham to find out what he was like. But God already knew Abraham. He knew what he was like. But Abraham had to find out about Abraham. He had to know what it was like also for God to allow his son to be crucified. And Abraham learned this. And we need to learn about ourselves. And when we really know what our eternal nature is and our tendencies towards good or evil, we're better to cope with the things that we encounter in this life. Brother Joseph, would you do this to close in prayer?
Okay, now look, the next one is a scissor step.
What are we doing?
Just make me feel like a woman.
Oh. Oh, it might break somebody's clothes. Yeah, you can't hold on to clothes because clothes can get short. Shoulders are okay, but not. We did duck walk already. Train.